Bam! MC is in the house. And a little low. There you go. A little better. What's going on, folks? My name is Justin Garcia, also known as Master Chim, and welcome to the Warrior Stream. I do this every week, Wednesday, noon Eastern Standard Time. And I am streaming right now not only to my main Facebook page and business, or is the personal page the main one? Personal and business page. I'm streaming to Twitter. I'm streaming to my main YouTube page. And I appreciate you guys coming and hanging out with me every time that I do. So what's up, Derek? I see you there. Caceres, what's going on, brother man? Good to see you. Anybody that's watching on Facebook, do me a favor and just give me a what's up, just so I could make sure that I'm being seen and heard on Facebook. While you guys are doing that, what's up, Corey? Just some housekeeping. If you guys have not yet, Yarn Saxa, what's up? Good to see you. If you guys have not yet gone to masterchim.com and gotten access to Master the 24-Hour Cycle, it is not only one of my favorite programs to have produced and delivered, but it's also been one of the most well-received programs, and it's my balance management system. It is absolutely free. You go to the site, masterchim.com, you put your email in. Your email then receives a coupon code for $47 off. Go back, you buy it, coupon code, it's free, you got the program. Why am I doing this? Because I want you to get free emails from me every day. The Master Chim letter is something I've been doing for years now, and it's how I stay connected with people over the last probably 8 years now, 7 years, 8 years. But you guys know that every once in a while I piss off people, algorithms, and everything in between. And sometimes, these platforms don't play nicely with me because I don't always play nicely with them. So how do you stay connected? You get on that email list and make sure you're getting my messages every day. Stellan, what's going on, my friend? Good to see you. Cherrytown Vibe in the house. Master Chim, Godfather, the Chim Pass, any more rest up, had a rest with you and the missus, by the way. I appreciate that. About the anniversary. The Chim Pass is my pass of choice. I'm talking about jiu-jitsu now, folks, for those of you guys that aren't following. And for those of you that watch or do jiu-jitsu, my Chim Pass is my take on the Sao Paulo Pass, which is pretty popular. So today, what are we doing? And my wife and I just had our 19th anniversary. That was the anniversary wish. So thank you for that. All right. So go to masterchim.com. All the links are down in the description. Doesn't matter if you're watching. I don't know if they're on Twitter, but you could get them the other places. So I sent out an email this morning. What's the name of today's talk? Sent out a couple of talking points that I want to cover. Brotherhood's Demise. Brotherhood's Demise. First off, how good are those thumbnail pics? It's all Mid-Journey, and I'm always surprised with just how good these are. It's sort of telling, it's really a commentary on how happy society will be when AI destroys it. Because it's like, wow, look at how cool those robots' weapons are. But I'm having fun while it's going on, and that was this morning's thumbnail from Mid-Journey, and you guys should go and check that out if you're interested in creating really, really cool pics. I'm an amateur when it comes to Mid-Journey. I don't know, how to do some of the more intricate things that I see people doing, but what I do know is I can't draw for shit. So my worst Mid-Journey rep is going to be better than my best pen and paper rep. So what else is going on? So Brotherhood's Demise, the basic premise of today's talk, and I have some things to discuss as usual, and I really would like you guys, to give me some feedback and some questions as I do to make this more interesting. I always, go back and forth between just producing videos, which realistically will be better produced and edited and more succinct, or live videos. One of the reasons I do live videos is because I don't have to do all the editing and production and all that other stuff. But it also gives me an opportunity to leverage the fact that you guys are here interacting with me as I'm putting this stuff out there. So please do that, because it keeps me doing a live and not just saying, you know what, I'm just going to produce this thing, make myself too available as it is. So that being said, Brotherhood's demise, and you can look at the picture to sort of get the basic sentiment of the topic at hand. There is a point where society, I truly believe, is going to rely on the ability of children to interact with one another. So let me say that again. Society's ability to succeed will be correlated, connected, reliant upon children's ability to interact with one another. The first talking point of the email that I shared, the value of a brother. Well, what's the value of a brother to begin with? In Brotherhood, we see a couple of different things played out. We see individuals who are, number one, connected to tribe. We see individuals, when there is a brotherhood, that it denotes a group of individuals combining their resources to thrive. Some cases survive, but to thrive, eventually together. So if there is brotherhood, there is that backdrop of the context of why brotherhood is going to exist in the first place. A brother is somebody, and let's talk a little bit about men and women naturally. And I prefer naturally over traditionally, although traditionally oftentimes works. But naturally, women are designed by their nature to have children. Men are designed by their nature not only to not have children, but to support the woman who is going to have the children. Basic, like, first principle biology, evolutionary drive type stuff here we're talking about. The value of a brother is that the man who leaves the home to navigate this world that naturally does not give one shit about him and his plight. Brotherhood is the beginnings of that individual leaving and not having to be alone. A man leaves the home, he meets other men, they endeavor together to acquire these resources they can bring back and collectively share with their homes. This is, again, very first principle type basic stuff. We're looking at the nature of men and women. Brotherhood is that mechanism by which men connect in that way. Now, obviously, this is, I'm talking about just this blueprint level design and nature of who we are as men and how brotherhood was born out of that. But obviously, the modern world does not have the same landscapes or ecosystems that these more natural base level attributes were born from. So obviously there is going to be a little move one way or another when it comes to these things. So if I'm talking about, brotherhood, it's the value is found in the support. The value is found in the synergy. My effort, your efforts combined produce more than the sum of our efforts individually. That extra, that surplus that is created in the form of synergy is a great driver of why brotherhood has value, why men connect with other men by and large more functionally than women will connect with women. You could disagree with that, but you'd be wrong. I'd agree with you, but then we'd both be wrong. But again, we're talking about, large numbers, just basic design, blueprint level observations. Yeah, men are going to be able to get along with men more generally speaking than women will get along with women. Why? Because men historically had to, right? Um, there's legacy involved in brotherhood. When I talk about one of the reasons that sacrifices and the idea or the phenomenon of sacrifice, why it's so important to understand for men, it's that without understanding what sacrifice is, we don't know how to connect ourselves to legacy. Now, in legacy, it's how we exist beyond the span of our individual lifetimes. That's what legacy is. How is, what remains after me, the consciousness, the voice in my head ceases to exist here? How, am I affecting, the world after I'm gone? That is what legacy is. So, in order to build legacy, we have to then invest resources in things that are not connected directly to us, but that represent us in a way that we see ourselves in them. Most naturally, commonly, this is in the form of children, but it could be, it could be in the form legacy we're speaking about. It could be in the form of children. It could be in the form of art, a business, some sort of a tribe, and then it gets into brotherhood. Why would one brother sacrifice himself for another brother? Why? Because in that other brother, he sees himself. Therefore, he can give his life, yet still preserving himself by saving the life through sacrifice. So brotherhood gives us yet another means by which we can build legacy at an individual level. There are, I know a lot of great men throughout my life who aren't married, don't have children, have achieved a great deal, and I could say have secured a legacy to a great extent. Not, the naturally fortified legacy of having children, obviously, but still creating a tremendous amount of value that exists in their alliances and their achievements throughout their lives. So the value of a brother, it is connected to those things. It's connected to the joining of men on their engagement with a reality, a world that does not care about them. It is in the synergy, in the return on investment, and when they're with their brothers, what they do produces more than they would have been able to produce by themselves. It is legacy in that they can connect in a way that they see themselves in other men, and this brotherhood is fortified by that legacy bond, because now these individual members of this brotherhood will sacrifice for the other members. The next point, why brotherhood's failing today. Why brotherhood's failing today. So when somebody asks me how people today could not want to work, get money from the government, buy their food with the welfare cards and do all these different things, how could people do that, or why could people do it? My answer is always, well, because it works, right? And sometimes we operate from this presumptive perspective that, well, obviously these people have morals and virtues that mirror ours. Obviously, these people don't want anything for free. Obviously, these people want to feel useful to the people around them. Obviously, these people want to build a favorable, reputation amongst, the people connected to them in their lives. And, these things aren't as obvious as I think we may think they are. So the reason brotherhood's failing right now in society, well, if society is the aquarium that I describe it as being, brotherhood is failing because we don't need it in order to survive or thrive within the aquarium. You don't need that, right? There is a population, and I don't know if this was an Asian population or if it was Tasmania. It might have been Tasmania, but one of them has, or maybe both of them have, the distinct reputation as being the only peoples in the history of mankind that have forgotten how to make fire. Right? They didn't know how to make fire. Well, that is a significant disconnect between, who they were and everybody that preceded them historically, ancestrally. There's a point where if we don't need to do things, why is it that we think we're just going to keep remembering how to do it? I was talking earlier to my mastermind group, and one of the members, shout out my man KD, was sharing that as a school teacher, he used to be a school teacher, and he said that he got to observe, firsthand how these young kids, these young boys specifically, over the course of a decade, how they made friends with one another, how they interacted, what that looked like. And he got to see that not only were the kids early on so different from what he remembers being a child, but even in that 10-year span, it made a significant change. He observed a significant change. You don't have to understand brotherhood. You don't need the bro code. You don't need a lot of these things that maybe we take for granted in a society that's going to take care of you either way. We understand that, if going by the original premise of what I was talking about, Big Fred, what up? Brewski, what's going on? Johnny, what's up? Good to see you. If we go by the earlier premise that I shared of a man, being the one that needed to leave the home to go and acquire resources while the women and children were home, the man would go and risk himself, and he was almost expendable, in that sense that he would expose himself to the risk because he needed to go out there to the real world and go get the stuff and bring it back to the people, bring it back to the wives and the children. Well, what happens if we no longer have to do that? Well, some people would consider that progress, or we don't need to, go out there anymore and do that because of technology, because of, the industry and all these different things, society and programs and governments and however people want to paint the picture. What I'm saying is you could have any way to explain it you want, but all that really means to me is that we have become the children, that somebody else is acquiring the resources to provide for us. It's not that men no longer need to venture outside of the home and connect with other men. It's that men can now stay in the home and act as if they are one of the children. So why is brotherhood failing? Because sometimes if you have somebody you don't get along with, society will let you just not get along with them. Like, you don't have to get along with them. You don't have to find a way to make things work. Historically, that wasn't always the case. Historically, there were times where you had to deal with people who you might not like on a personal level, but that had nothing to do with whether or not you were willing to work with them towards some sort of tribal effort to accomplish some sort of task. One had nothing to do with the other. We are so spoiled in today's society that we get to just choose who we interact with, especially if you're in an urban environment. There's so many people there. Why should any one be more special than the other? Why should I have to learn how to maintain relationships if there's no real consequence to speak of because there's so many people? Things are different when those numbers are different. Things are different when you have a small group of people around you and you have to find a way to interact. Why is brotherhood failing? Because we no longer need it in this aquarium. The need still exists universally. The need still exists that men be able to sort of work together to synergistically acquire resources to provide for their families, namely the wives and the children. But in this, the society, in the aquarium, those needs are fulfilled. Think about how many men these days are just fragile mentally and physically, how they can avoid pressure at levels that no men before them could ever manage to avoid. Men today could be soft and mushy. They could be losers. They could be uneducated. They could be physically incapable of function. They like there's any deficiency that you could think of in the male experience is somehow accommodated in the aquarium. You know, you're out of shape. You can't make it from A to B. Here's a car. You know, you don't want a car. You want a bike. Here's a bike. You can't use a bike. Here's an electric bike they have now. You can get on a bike and play with the pedals while the electric motor moves the bike for you. Like, just how easy do we want our lives to be? Well, there's a consequence for that. Think about, you know, I'm just thinking of this, you know, example, this analogy now, a bunch of kids. I remember me and a bunch of my friends, we all had bikes, right? We would go on rides and we would go on bike rides through trails if we found them, or usually I'm from the Bronx. So there were a lot of, you know, just streets and routes we would go. We'd take a bike ride down to Manhattan, then come back. Well, think about if there was one fat fuck in the group. And there was one fat fuck that, hey, we're going for a ride down to Manhattan. Well, you know, fat fuck can't go because the fat fuck can't make it on the bike all the way to Manhattan. But now the pressure for fat fuck to be less of a fat fuck so he can go on a trip with us, that pressure has been completely eliminated because now that fat fuck can get on a moped, an electronic bike. Now there's no pressure, there's no incentive, there's no reward for him actually making his body healthy. And that's just an example, a hypothetical of what winds up happening over and over again in a society that has such a surplus of resources. You know, why is Brotherhood failing? Because we don't need it in the aquarium. So obviously, the obvious problem, maybe it's obvious to me, but I think if you guys are watching me, you're connected to this. The obvious problem is, well, what happens when the aquarium stops providing for us? What happens when we no longer have the ability to just have, you know, big daddy government, you know, bring home the groceries, you know, so to speak? What happens when that occurs? Are we one of these civilizations that lost the ability to build fire? From what I understand, those people were extinct. Those societies collapsed. There's a certain point where if we don't understand what we are getting, how do we know to prepare for the possibility, one could say the inevitability, of these gifts in the form of resources leaving our lives? What happens when Big Daddy government kicks us off the teat? How ready are you? I've said before, like, listen, I'm not somebody who, I'm not grabbing my fucking magnesium stick and flint and fucking and a wool blanket and running into the woods and me and my family are good and I'm gonna, you know, not. I'm lucky I know how to tie my fucking shoelaces like knots. I study knots every day. I don't know why. I give myself more aggravation than anything. So I'm not claiming to be, you know, one of these guys that's just ready to go and do my thing. But here's the thing I will say. I know a lot of motherfuckers that care about me. I know a lot of motherfuckers that I care about. Shit hits the fan. I got a crew and we're connected. And any deficiencies that I have, a lot of them have in surplus and vice versa. I make myself valuable every day and I make myself a good investment for other people. That is a great platform on which to build Brotherhood and the value and start accessing the values of Brotherhood. You know, to be connected to brothers means to be worth something to them. They see value. That's the impetus for the alliance in the first place. You're bringing something to the table. You don't have to be perfect. Remember, loners are losers. There's never been that model in human history whereby an individual just thrived on his own, and somehow society or even the species itself managed to sustain itself. It's not just not the way it works. We are tribal animals. We work together, right? Cherrytown Vibe asks, shouldn't there be some type of training involved on how the approach of brotherhood be taken? If so, what does that look like? So I will say that, yeah, you could start by buying my book, TRIBALNOMICS. One of the things I talk about in TRIBALNOMICS is, how these variables interact with one another. What are the dynamics at play? What is the controllable? What is not controllable? How do we build some sort of peace, and system, sustainable system, considering the way that these variables interact with one another? It's like, yeah, there are things that we've learned. See, you got to understand, if you grew up in a really, really small town, or, millennia ago in really, really small tribes and in isolated areas, or like, there's a certain point where we were never introduced to the variety that gets us in trouble. There wasn't, I'm not going to talk to my neighbor because he's an asshole. Like, it's like, yeah, that's my neighbor. He's an asshole. But obviously, we're still going to connect the way neighbors connect, because that's the way we survive the winter. That's the way that we thrive as a people. Like, so there were options and variety introduced, when we had surplus of resources. Without that surplus of resources, there weren't these options. So a lot of it has to do with, well, how much, and here's a little, paradigm shift. When I talk about having a philosophy and a mindset based in gratitude, and I say the antithesis or the opposite of that is entitlement, this is exactly what I'm talking about. How much do we have today that we suddenly feel entitled to? Entitled to so much that we no longer stay connected with how to acquire it ourselves. Society is changing right now. Society, it's always changing is an argument, but right now we're at the cusp of, I think, a level of technological distraction that people are really going to be, losing their minds over how they thought they were supposed to be and how completely useless and obsolete technology is making those ways to be. And they're going to tell themselves that their life has lost meaning and value because they are now useless. And the entitlement of that perspective can be found in their disconnection from what they still actually have. If you are healthy, if you wake up every morning, if you have access to food and water, and like the climate is accommodating in some way, you have a shelter that you live in, like, these are the base level, building blocks for gratitude that scale into these other areas without losing the sense of who we are as an individual. But if you're somebody who, the aquarium has you thinking your only purpose for being here is like, oh, I was meant to be I don't fucking know, a programmer for this app company. It was what I was born to do. That wasn't what you were fucking born to do. If you want to get really base level with it, you were born to get food, make babies, and acquire resources. Like, these are the things you were born to do. You got to build from there. But losing such a specialized application of who you are shouldn't hurt at all if you're connected to a philosophy of gratitude that reminds you that you exist separate from the system that you benefit from. I think it was a buddy of mine down in Philly. He was a security guard at a supermarket. armed security, and he said that shit got real froggy one time when the EBT cards went down. Like people couldn't, use their government credit cards to buy food and stuff. He said people started getting real froggy. It's like, could you imagine a computer system goes down and suddenly people become dysfunctional members of society? Like not beyond how dysfunctional they are to begin with, but suddenly the person who's standing online, a computer doesn't work, and now he is getting violent, anxious, and just chaos is about to ensue because a computer went down. I'll contrast that to the example of some sort of solar storm flare. I think it happened in the 1880s, and I don't know too many of the specifics, but I remember this one observation is that at the time, society had such a low reliance on technology that all the technology was fried because of this solar flare, and nobody even noticed. Something like the telegrams, like were out of commission for like 2 days or something, but everybody just went on. Life went on as usual. And compare that to now, if the computers went down. Like, think about it, all the times that there are, blackouts and such. And just the unnatural design of societies is exposed and revealed for what it is. People being held together functionally by an illusion, right? This illusion of security and stability. Power goes out. People are getting robbed, mugged, raped, killed, everything in between. Like, it's so easy to be able to figure out if you're paying attention to it. Sean, what's up, Sean? He says, I'm 28 and I've grown up in the aquarium. I could get by and survive while doing so little. It's not a fulfilling experience by any stretch, but I'm on my path to becoming better. And kudos to you. I myself, obviously born and raised in the Bronx, I share the sentiment, a lot of overlap there. Now, what I will say is having a life that is fulfilling, we need to really stay connected to what that even means. I think a lot of times people think the ultimate goal or destination is happiness. And sometimes I think a little bit more expressively, they will use fulfillment, so happiness being the least developed, the least, articulate way to describe life's goals or life's value, the achievement of happiness. Fulfillment is after that. And I would say that, and I've made this point before, we need to build a gratitude not only for the summers, so to speak, but the winters as well, because one would not exist without the other. And I think when you just pull the camera back and you look at, the good times make the bad times allow for the good times. When you understand that this is cyclical, what you wind up being grateful for, what winds up being fulfilling, what winds up making you happy is just the movement. It's just the movement of it all. We don't need times to always be good. We don't need, nor do we want times to always be bad. But if we don't want times to always be bad, we also shouldn't want times to always be good. What we should want is that the cycle keeps turning. That's what we should want. That's a great thing to anchor our happiness and fulfillment to, right? A tool that I use and I share with individuals, to be used in like these times of anxiety, these events that wind up, overwhelming individuals. It's, first off, you start with the observation. It's like, well, what was the probability of this happening? And you say 100%. How do I know it was 100%? Because there it is. So obviously prior to this, it was 100%. We don't have to get into any quantum mechanics or Schrodinger or anything like that. Like, just take it for what it is. It's 100% because it's there. And then the next step of that is asking ourselves, well, what steps preceded this that I could pay attention to? So should those steps present themselves again, I know to anticipate this outcome rearing its head yet again. It is a more productive way to be. In other words, it is movement-based. It's not about, well, how does this make you feel? It's about, well, given the exposure and experience that you just endured, what are you now going to do? How do we keep the movement? How do we maintain an anchor and connection to that movement? Because Sarah says the crazy anticipation of Y2K. Absolutely. People were losing their fucking minds. They thought that the devil was going to come out of the ceiling. The world was going to explode like the Terminators and like everything under the sun. What happened? Nothing. Corey says, in the city, it's chaos when traffic lights at an intersection malfunction or temporarily go out. So just imagine society without the internet. Absolutely. Absolutely. I've spoken before on how morality and legality are two different things. And the greater societies had more of an overlap of those two things, but one does not necessarily, or I should say, the laws do not inform morality. It's quite the opposite. But there are people who probably don't rape because rape is illegal and they don't want to endure that consequence. Those are the deviants. It's the reason, the purpose for the laws to begin with. But you'll have individuals who will also have a functional system for interacting and coexisting that is fortified by the legal consequences of them not conducting themselves that way. It's like when you go, I haven't been on a train in 20 years, admittedly, and, thankfully, gratefully. But, growing up being on the New York City trains, everybody's agreeing to basically stand in this, metal box for different lengths of time and at different levels of intimacy, you could say, based on how packed it is. And everybody sort of just goes along with, yeah, this is what we're going to do. Just think about how everybody collectively needs to participate in that for it to be functional. And how everybody, every train has the potential for complete and utter chaos and violence and death. And, but everybody says, you know what, we're just going to fucking behave. Somebody gets run over by a train and now you're stuck in a dark, tunnel, underground, shoulder to shoulder during rush hour for an hour until they, scrape up the fucking the idiot Parmesan that's on the tracks, and everybody's just like, oh yeah, this sucks. A lot of mumbling and grumbling, but everybody pretty much doesn't kill each other. Think about how they have to be trained in order to act that way in that situation. How unnatural that situation is otherwise. It's like, this is how people learn to behave themselves. And the thing is, all I'm saying is when we could act as natural as possible and then find the ecosystems, or I should say the landscapes in which to play out that natural acting, that's when we're most resilient. That's when we're least reliant upon, aquariums for providing our stuff. The last point that I raised, the cost of a broken brother system. The cost of a broken brother system. You have a society that no longer relates to one another. And that image, depicted this idea. You had the older brother in the image, and he was on his phone. You had the younger brother basically, wandering, doing his own thing. And there was no connection between these brothers. And technology, obviously, is what's distracting the older brother. And it's just a matter of time before the younger brother in this society, by and large, winds up connecting with technology too. And the tragedy of it is that these two individual brothers will never make a connection individually that necessarily transcends their reliance upon that technology, or more generally, that relies on or transcends the reliance upon the resources provided by the aquarium. That's how you have people. That's how you have families that, that just don't know how to interact with one another. You'll have, children that don't connect with their parents. Like, the parents like a drag. and they don't look for their parents, or they find a way to put their parents in a home, because lest my life and my wife's life be made inconvenient, like it's just the woman that fucking raised you. Yeah, like why would you take care of her? And this isn't comfortable for a lot of people to hear, but this is what happens when you have a broken brother system. When you have a system that does not incentivize and reward connecting with other people, right? So my advice to people, like, what are the action steps that you could take? Said before, get rid of social media. Get rid of social media. None of you guys are going to fucking do it. But I did give 2 criteria by which, I give social media a thumbs up. And that's for business, to make money, to provide for your family, and to connect with people in small groups in social media that in the real world. People that in the real world, like, yeah, this is, social media could be an upgraded version of a phone. And you can interact that way. Better than snail mail, right? Better than email, even, you could say, for the group dynamic. My wife has a WhatsApp group with all of her family in Brazil. And she says there's like 20 of them on there, which is pretty cool. Like, do you guys have 20 family members that could be on a WhatsApp group functionally and deal with one another because you all give a shit about each other? Like, so it's certainly not the norm for the American experience, but she has all her family there. Like, that is an example of, yeah, this is how these people stay connected. Some of them are all over either Brazil or, in my wife's case, she's here in the US. But social media, by and large, just disconnects you from the process that builds these real world connections. How many of your friends are virtual friends? Like, even you guys that support me with all these meetings, like some of you, a bunch of you here, I know in the real world, but even like the utility that I have for you should be very limited. I just look to inspire you to connect with people in the real world. That's what I am. I'm an asset in that sense. But one of you guys, if I don't know you, and let's say there's a Billy Smith that every single Warrior stream is on the stream, and he's always commenting and he's always there and just like that. But I don't know. I only know him from me. And one day I got a knock on my door and he's, hey, it's Billy Smith. Like, Billy might have a problem. What the fuck are you doing at my house? But we've had, hundreds of these positive interactions. Motherfucker, that was online. That's not real, and there's just a disconnect for some people where that's concerned. Just food for thought as usual. Chris says, what's up, Chris? He says, I made sure to take care of my dad in his twilight years. He lived in my basement, nice little efficiency apartment. Even when he came home from the hospital in a coma, he passed away here. And good on you. That's the way to do it. That's the way to do it. Tried to do it with my mom as well. Twice she refused to respect my personal space. Got too much to deal with. So now that's the difference between dads and moms, right? A mom is going to want to, mother till the end. And I think that's a great example of what that is. But, my father passed a couple of years ago. 5 years, is it? And my mother now, like, there's my brother and I, like, my mother knows that we will never put her in a home. Like, I don't care if my mother lives in my house, my brother's house. Like, I don't care if we buy a house where we all live together. Like, my mother will never be in a home. I failed as a man. I failed as a son if I wind up discarding my mother to some institution in the name of convenience. Now, listen, some of you guys don't have functional relationships with your mother. So listen, fucking take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. Apply it to your own situation as you want. But it's just, I look to walk the walk with a lot of what I'm saying here. I'm not, just sharing that, you guys should do what looks coolest, feels best, or makes you the most popular with strangers. Like, no, sometimes you do things that feel, like winter, but you have to be just as grateful for them, because without those occurrences, how would there ever be the summers, right? I'm always curious about, parents of children that have Down syndrome, right? And I've worked with some kids who have had Down syndrome in the past. And one of the things about, people with Down syndrome is, in my experience and exposure to them, is they're just always so, like, they're certainly simple, but they're always positive, and that they have this childlike, effect, and the lens at which they look through things. And I always think about how, the parents, whenever they've interacted with these kids, how it's just a parent-child relationship. And, these parents are looking at these children like, like like my parents would look at me when I was younger. I worked in a camp for physically handicapped children at one point for a couple of years. And I was like a camp counselor during the summer. And some of these kids, like fully just spastic, extreme cerebral palsy, no real functional use of any of their muscles. But you see them interacting with their parents, and it looked like a kid and his mom and dad. And it was as normal as can be. So a lot of this is relative, because you would think, like me having had to take care of some of these kids, to different levels during the time that they were at camp. It's like, oh, what a drain this is, like physically. And, this is my 18-year-old, 19-year-old mind. It's like, man, this is such a drag. This is so, why couldn't he be like a normal kid where I wouldn't have to do it? But all of it's relative, So a son taking care of his mother, like, don't tell me how difficult it's going to be. Like, it's all relative. Like, either it's your mother or it's not. And if you have a mother and would discard her because of any perceived future inconveniences, like, you're a piece of shit. I started this whole talk by talking about Brotherhood's demise, and it's those types of men that wind up destroying what Brotherhood has always been. If you consider yourself a man, and one of the tenets of that manhood is I provide for the people who rely on me, well, what better example of your value then than what you could do for your mother as she gets older? So I think I got everything off my chest I wanted to. I think that was a good talk. As with most of my stuff, you guys take it, for what you will. I have people that do individual coaching with me who pay me a lot of money. I got people who are in my mastermind group who pay me a lot of money. These people take a lot of these strategies and they apply it to their life. Those of you that are interacting and connecting with me through one of these, forms of media, really, you do with it what you want. Didn't cost you anything, and it doesn't cost me anything if you choose to follow it or don't. Just sharing my perspective. All right, guys, I'll end it there. I'll be here next week. My voice is almost shot. I've been doing videos all day, but I appreciate you guys hanging out with me. I hope you got something out of it. I'll see you guys next week. And as always, brothers and sisters, pressure to power.